Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Mason. I'm a member of the program committee for the National Railway Historical Society's DC chapter, and I'm your host for this evening. Tonight, I'm assisted by Garen Goldsmith and Jim Perry. The DC chapter mission is to expand the public appreciation of railroads and their history through the preservation and education. And we accomplish this mission through a variety of programs, including sponsoring a scholarship for a rail camp for a high school student. We operate 3 rail cars, including 2 in cars in our beloved 1923 Pullman car, the Dover Harbor. We maintain a library for railroad memorabilia and books at Bowie Tower in Maryland. And we publish our monthly newsletter, The Timetable. Another way we fulfill our mission is by offering these free public programs, including tonight's event. So tonight, our speaker, George Hamlin, will take us on a walk through the history of railroad signals using his amazing photography. Mr. Hamlin holds a Master of Science in Transportation from Northwestern University, and he is the author of 4 books about various transportation topics. During his 40-plus years working for several transportation-related organizations, he's had the time to practice his 2 favorite topics, photography and transportation. In this case, you'll be delighted tonight with the vast array of railroad signals that he is going to take and deliver to us using his own photography. It's amazing. So sit back, settle in as Mr. Hamlin takes us on a captivating journey of railroad signaling. Over to you, George.
Thank you, Ann. Well, we're going to talk about signals, as she told you. And basically, what we're going to speak much about tonight is changes that are still ongoing now and into the future. Here we are, the date's right, we're at the DC chapter. Good, I think we're in the right place. Let me get this going with saying that in the field of railroading and rail fanning, rail enthusiasm, there are a number of things that I can call great disappearing acts that I've seen in my lifetime, and I think this has gone on before. One is obviously the steam locomotive. Here's an NS excursion down in North Georgia behind the 1218 in the latter part of the 1980s. The passenger train. This is the famous Who Shot the Passenger Train issue of the David Morgan era in the late 1950s. I suspect this had to be done with scissors, knives, paste up, etc., but today it could all be done digitally. But the passenger train was pretty much on the way out the door at that point. Whole railroads have disappeared. And this entity, this is very early Conrail, depicts both Conrail's paint scheme and 2 predecessors, Penn Central and the Erie Lackawanna. Coal, long a mainstay of the railroad business, but is in serious decline now. And last but not least, signals. I'll talk some more about some of the particular aspects of this. This is on the former Southern Railway southwest of Washington, D.C. But let's get into some of the changes. Of course, now, more often than not, you see news type signals, and with the hood on them like this, they're often referred to as Darth Vaders. Many rail fans give them about the same respect that they give Darth Vader, for that matter. Here's a look at the same signal we just saw from a head-on perspective. We still have 3 color lights, or actually these are probably LEDs, but you know, they don't have quite the character some of the old railroad-specific signals do. This is an installation you can see work in progress. This is on the former nickel plate in northern Ohio, at Lipsick, Ohio. This is on the former RF&P at a place called Jones Crossing, north of Fredericksburg. South of Fredericksburg, between Fredericksburg and Richmond. This is a pretty unique installation where they've left up the old signals, but in adding a second head have used the newer types, which you can see on the bottom. Signals typically on the right side is facing the current of traffic, but as the newer ones have been installed, it's been easier to put the intermediate signals in particular just on the same base back to back in many cases. This is on the former L&N's Louisville-Cincinnati short line. Probably a lot of you have seen this, particularly if you actually commute by Mark from St. Denis, you have definitely seen this. Even with the new, not as well-liked signals, they can still be an impressive cluster when you get this many in the same place. Stepping back a little bit so you can see how it looks in situ, I think is the fancy word for this. You can see the signals in the background at this interlocking where 4 tracks are merging into 3. Of course, the one on the left is the one that goes to the old main line at Relay, just a mile or 2 south of here. Let's look at signals from a railroad context. While you read this, I'd like you to mull over, this has got to be from some piece of juvenile literature that some of us digested in our youth, maybe perhaps a little golden book from back in the day, right? No, the literature isn't juvenile at all. This was taken from a B&O employee's timetable. And there are further things down there that says, do not try to anticipate the signals I display. In other words, you actually have to go by what you see. Remember, no job is so important that you cannot take the time to do the job safely. That is true. This was an important safety device when particularly electrically controlled signaling came into vogue in the early part of the 20th century. Here is a Southern timetable for the pre-World War II period that, Southern advertised itself as double track Washington Atlanta main line automatic block signals. And they updated this when the diesel showed up. I think that this, on the one on the right, the 1948 post-war schedule, I think this is actually near the Manassas Station, which was sort of out in the country at that point. It doesn't look like that now. Here's a fairly late in the private passenger train era passenger timetable from the New York Central, which features the signals at Mott Haven Junction in New York, where the Hudson and Harlem lines split off. The Southern, which of course ran its own passenger trains into the Amtrak era, their slogan in the 1970s was, Southern is the railway system that gives a green light to innovations. Of course, using the green signal is the motif for that. You can probably still very occasionally, although I have not seen one in the last year or two, this picture is maybe 5-6 years old, but they were all over Southern equipment, particularly boxcars, with this slogan, including the green signal light. This is at a sort of antique dealer down at Natural Bridge Station in the Shenandoah Valley between Lexington and Roanoke. Now, like many other photographers, I didn't think of going out and photographing signals. They were there. They were somewhat different. Now look at this. This is Chicago Northwestern. This is, they call their commuter trains in Chicago scoots. The various railroads had different names for them, including dummies was popular on one or two. And the CN&W had some very unique short-dated semaphore systems on its lines. There they are in the background. Did I think of walking down the platform and making them more the focal point? No, but in fairness, this nice cast iron work on the lamp was worth seeing too. CN&W had color lights as well. Former New Haven main line at Mamaroneck, New York, and Westchester County, North New York City. The very distinctive overhead catenary, and yes, signals that are much like the former New York Central small searchlights as well. Joliet, Illinois, early 70s, one of the new Amtrak turbo trains at the time. Lots of semaphores. Now, this would have required a little more effort to get down amongst all the tracks and might not have been appreciated, but here are the ones in the other direction. And again, I was photographing the turbo train, not the signals. This is Amtrak's Texas Chief in the early 70s. Looks very much like the Santa Fe's Texas Chief. That's a group of fans who have come down. This is November 14th, 1971, the date of the first run-throughs at Chicago Union Station between St. Louis and Milwaukee. That's a group of fans who came down from Milwaukee for the event and to ride back on the first through train going north. Take a look also, there's a small dwarf that's outlined in red here. There's also another one facing the other way that I didn't outline, but something you could easily overlook for that matter. The famous, well, at one point, electric to steam, and then by this time in the 70s, electric to diesel engine change in Harmon, New York, was some of the small New York Central searchlights in the background, and also a former Cleveland Union Terminal P motor. A little further up the New York Central's Hudson Division at south of Bear Mountain, New York at Manitou on the East Shore, and the Roar turbo trains this time. New Haven, Connecticut, early Amtrak Merchants Limited with a platform starting signal in the foreground. And of course, the mighty GG1 there as well. And a motley collection of just after Amtrak heritage equipment. Let's take a look just in brief at some of the different types. Probably the most common in various respects are the 2 and 3 light signals they're like traffic signals, except that typically you'll get the green on the top, although in the C&O, you'll actually have red top and bottom on some occasions, depending on what the aspect of the signal is. This is at the former coal yard at Gladstone, northeast of Lynchburg. The station's still there. They're trying to move it off the property before CSX attempts to scrap it again. These are called searchlights. You had a single light bulb back there and then colored filters, red, green, and yellow, to change the aspect. This is a place called Sulphur, Kentucky, also on the L&N's short line. Tri-lights, or Type Gs. These were very popular on several railroads. New York Central, this is X-Big 4. The Rock Island used them. Actually, New Jersey Transit installed quite a bit. That came down from their time at Conrail. This is out in northern Ohio. Closer up, the famous Pennsylvania Railroad position light signals, one color, amber. But horizontal, this mimics semaphores to some degrees. Horizontal was stop, vertical was proceed, and medium speed was the diagonal from northeast to southwest. This is up just west of Horseshoe Curve. These, of course, are gone now. And here is a veritable primer on the 3 aspects of the color of the Pennsy position light signals. That's approach on the left, stop in the middle, and the right track here, which we're on riding in a dome car, is proceed. Both the N&W and the B&O had color position light signals where the geometric aspect of it are the same as the Pennsy signals, but they use color lights instead of just the amber. Here are all 3 aspects on an N&W color position light that is now gone up at a place called Ashby, not far from where I live now. Amtrak has adapted many of the former Pennsylvania position lights. This is on the Keystone Line. It's a place called Irishtown Road, which was one of the last grade crossings, and that's been eliminated now. This was when it still had its full Pennsy position light array. And after conversion have gone to the color lights like the N&W. Plus, take a look at how bright those brand new LEDs are compared to the old incandescent bulbs. This is coming off the bridge at Perryville. And again, color position lights on the northeast corridor. Some of the western lines, this is west of Pittsburgh, on the former PRR, just south of Conway Yard. Only the red indication is in color. The proceed and the approach or caution are still amber bulbs, or were at this time. Here's a set of B&O CPLs at Glendale, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati. As you can see, these signals have various, I think they're lunar white targets above and sometimes below. This aspect is one you don't see very often. It is restricting for restricted speed. This is at Brunswick, which many of you are probably familiar with. This signal, which has been converted to the more modern type, on the left has all of the possibilities of the B&L CPL system. 3 white lights above, 3 below, plus the main color light target in the middle. And those could be lit up in a variety of ways to convey many different things. This is on the former Louisville and Nashville at a place called Cartersville, Georgia. Take a look at the signal head, the paired heads on the right. To their down below and to the right is a blue light. That stays lit constantly. It's called a doll arm, DOLL arm. What that means is that sidetrack that is meandering through the landscape on the far right, the signal doesn't apply to that one. It applies to the track that's one over, the one straight ahead, and then merging into the main line. There's still a number of these around, but you have to look for them, and then it's helpful to know why they're there. Most signals are, you can call them tall because they're up, well above the height of an average person. There are those closer to the ground. This is on the Buffalo line of the former Pennsy going north of Harrisburg. I think I've heard these referred to as paddle signals, and their design mimics the position lights in terms of what the aspect means, although this one at least has had its stop converted to red. The common name for a small signal sitting like this close to the ground is a dwarf. This is Brunswick, Maryland, coming out of the yard going west. Now, something that could be seen in Washington's Union Station, I don't know if you call this a dwarf on stilts or a tall dwarf or what, but it's up at normal height. Starting signal at the Los Angeles Union passenger terminal. This was during their 50th anniversary celebration. There was quite a party and a lot of equipment to see. The good news is fans could, within reason, roam all over the place that day, and nobody bothered them. Now, here are dwarf signals both on the normal signal bridge and down at platform level. I've often wondered what the wiring diagram for this looks like. Now, in fairness, this is a compressed with a telephoto lens shot, but there are quite a number of wires and connections up there nonetheless. That's the southbound Crescent arriving in Washington. This probably gets my vote for ugliest signal that I've seen in recent times. It's in Brunswick, Maine, the terminus of the Downeaster service on Amtrak. And it's obviously a fairly recent one. Expense was spared in terms of its decoration. This word, as referred to in modern times, it has referred to semaphores because they have blades. Here's a southbound train coming off the former Monon at Louisville, Kentucky, that has just crossed the Ohio River and is awaiting getting into Youngtown Yard, which is immediately behind me. Different view, different day of the same general location. This was the approach to the Ohio River Bridge leaving Youngtown Yard. This train was a run-through between Louisville and Galesburg, Illinois, between the Southern Railway and the Burlington. It's 4 SD24s here. This is in 1971, so not something you can see recently. Chicago, Ann alluded to the fact that I attended a transportation program at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. There were lots of things to see on weekends. This is a major junction called Griffith. The Grand Trunks line is still there. The Canadian National, which is the former EJ&E, is still there, and everything else is gone, including the tower, of course. I discovered when we lived for about 3 years in the Houston, Texas area that the Southern Pacific's line between Houston and Dallas, which was a secondary, although some people have suggested to me it was actually a tertiary main line, was controlled by lower quadrant semaphores. And finally had a chance to get out and see them. Now, a train was coming here, or would be soon, but did the light last? You probably know the answer to that. By the time the train showed, the light simply wasn't as good. Here's a silhouette of semaphores on the, I guess, soon to be former Montana Rail Link. It came out of the Burlington Northern and it's going back into the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. This is a place called Trestle Creek, east of Sandpoint, Idaho. One of the neat things about semaphores is you can see from that last silhouette shot, you can see what the aspects are going both ways without even having to get out of the car. Or in a place like that, you couldn't have gotten to the signals. This is also on the MRL at a place called Belknap, Montana. Sometimes when you want a train, well, you have to wait and then it eventually comes. Well, I was surprised to see the UP unit in this one. These semaphores are, of course, gone now, too. This is on the former Santa Fe Transcon Railroad east of Albuquerque. It's actually north of Albuquerque, Bernalillo. And these are now gone. There are some remaining out in the countryside beyond there, but it's a problem because essentially only the Amtrak's Southwest Chief in both directions runs that line. So you get at most 2 shots a day. This is a piece of signaling apparatus, even though it doesn't actually display indications. This is a freshly repainted automatic train stop, basically electromagnet to catch the shoe on the locomotive if necessary. And there is weekday passenger service south of Santa Fe on this line. Actually, Santa Fe is off on a Modish branch with the New Mexico state-sponsored Roadrunner trains. I won't make you guess at this one. As you can see, the rails aren't very far apart. This is in Nairobi, Kenya. And the disappointing thing was what this told me very quickly was that I was not going to see a moving train in the near future, which proved to be true. This is basically at Nairobi Station. This is at a place called Limerick Junction in Ireland. It has what's noteworthy is the longest station platform in Ireland. The platform is only on one side of one track, so the northbound trains and southbounds both access it, although not on the same track. In theory, you could have a northbound and southbound at the same time, and as long as one of them let the other depart, it would work fine. And of course, the Irish weather is quite changeable. 20 minutes, it may be full sunlight. At least the sun was on the dark clouds in this case. This also at Lipsick, Ohio on the Indiana and Ohio. It is a relatively new installation. This is one that doesn't move. It simply is an indication that you are approaching and interlocking. The best you can have with this typically is approach. You are supposed to slow down for possible stop at this point. There's a type of signal that I haven't seen one of these in recent times at all. It's a train order signal. Back in the early 90s, the NS was still had operating people in the depot at Manassas. And, if they wanted to issue orders, use the train order signal. Here's the Amtrak Crescent arriving eastbound in the morning. A shot of a little different type down in southern Tennessee, east of Chattanooga, on the Southern's line between Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Bristol. Former Southern's line. As you can see, the transition is in effect here. Here's a train order signal at a place called Tomball, Texas. It's north of Houston, about 30 miles or so. There's a BN grain train coming across the main street here. This station was fairly unique. The agent was a woman named Ollie Goodson. She had been the agent there for quite a while. She was known as Miss Ollie. And here she is getting ready to put up some train orders for another Burlington Northern train. There were 2 very unique things about this depot. One, it was the neatest railroad place I have ever seen. Everything was clean, orderly. And the final touch was the curtains on the window made by, guess who? Miss Ollie. I have never seen another railroad depot with curtains. Now, in a lot of cases, modern train order signals were just color lights. The signal on the left is an operating signal. This is an early Amtrak Empire builder coming down the Milwaukee Road into Chicago. The one on the right is for a train to take train orders going north. Hempstead, Texas, you can see an ordinary color light signal for there may have been a depot here at one point, but the tin sheds have shown up since then. Well, I had gotten the message at some point that you might want to really focus on the signals to some extent. this is really sort of a twofer. I think it's the only good picture I have of Bud's successor to the RDC, the SPV, which very quickly became known in Metro North as the seldom powered vehicle. Many of these were made into just trailer coaches. Here's a lot of, in reality, steam age, facilities left in Gordonsville, Virginia. Old C&O cantilever signals, what was the freight station, and then obviously a water tank that dates to the steam locomotive era. The line in the foreground it goes on to Doswell and Richmond. In the background, you can see the signals in the distance. That's the line that's used by the Cardinal to get up to Orange and back onto the Norfolk Southern. The Cardinal is essentially, with the exception of, I think this once in a blue moon, there's a movement from Gordonsville to Orange up to a tie plant in Orange. But otherwise, 3 days a week with the Cardinals in both directions is all it gets. Searchlight, this is Amtrak's California Zephyr departing Sacramento, California for the Bay Area. Brand new SD50 on the now Seaboard system, former L&N at Ackworth, Georgia, north of Atlanta. This situation has changed somewhat considerably. The track on the right is the Big Four's Columbus, Ohio to Cleveland main line. Now, this CSX move is swinging off to go on to the former B&O. This is a place in Ohio that it is spelled the same as Greenwich, England. But you don't pronounce this town as Greenwich. It's pronounced Greenwich. And one hint to this is you drive into the town, there's a sign welcoming you. And on the sign is pictured a Wizard of Oz style witch with pointed hat and a green skin. So you know you're in Greenwich. Train race. Santa Fe line has railroad signals. I'm not sure. I don't remember what the San Diego trolley had, but there are none visible here. And I think two things will probably happen here fairly soon. The Amtrak, this is either a San Diegan or, as the Californians sometimes say, a Santa Barbarian. It will begin accelerating and the trolley will stop soon. So I know who wins the race. Some Type Gs at a place called Elmwood Place, just north of Cincinnati. Again, going up the Big Four to Columbus. This was a sad loss to fans in this region. These are the former NW CPLs at Montgomery, Virginia, which is also well known for having a pair of tunnels, which you will see here. Winston link shot here, among other things. Here's in NS back-to-back Darth Vader on the line on the B line west of Manassas. This is their this was one of the more surprising special NS paint scheme. Nobody had heard of Go Rail before this, or at least nobody outside the industry. I don't know why there's such a great height distance difference between the two signal heads here. This is on the former L&N coming off the street running in Anchorage, Kentucky. And a WCPL at Buena Vista on the Shenandoah line. The former Burlington's triple track raceway with searchlights that are now gone. Former New York Central, now CSX at Berea, Ohio. That's the Berea station, which at various times has been a restaurant of one sort or another in the background. Old style signal on the NS at Elkwood, Virginia, that's been replaced by a newer one. C&O cantilever at Orange, Virginia. Here is that multi-headed monster in Baltimore with a trash train heading south. Interestingly, in the 1970s, the B&O decided to reorganize its operations in Cincinnati, which was a major junction between the B&O and C&O, and for that matter, the L&N by the time CSX was there. And they actually installed new color position lights on the former C&O. This is just across the Ohio River from Cincinnati in Covington. Amtrak at Metro Park. Of course, you've got a New Jersey Transit commuter train canting to the curve here. Type Gs, I think I mentioned, this is on the former Jersey Central. This obviously stemmed from the Conrail era. It's at Bound Brook. Searchlight on the entrance to a coal-fired power plant that's on the Wisconsin-Illinois border north of Chicago. A lot of structure here to hold up basically one set of lights. This is what's called a bracket mast. We've got two masts held together on the main part of the signal. It's a place called Miller City, Ohio. This is a priority coiled steel train that runs from northern Ohio basically to Chicago. Deschler in northwestern Ohio is still the home of a lot of B&O CPLs. They're still out there. I know people who are from that area and say, yeah, they're there. This was called the crossroads of the B&O. It's where the east-west line crossed the Cincinnati-Toledo line, and lots of CPLs in close proximity here. N&W CPLs, these are in place, but they're beginning to take down the remaining color position lights on the Shenandoah Valley line. This is in Buena Vista, Virginia. Newark, Delaware, with except for the fact that the train headed by the 645 is stopping at Newark, this would have been a north of 100-mile-an-hour approach speed if both of them had been at speed. The Acela was at speed. Something I got a good chance to take pictures of after moving to Northern Virginia in 1989 were what they call the Boxcar Bridges. These are former Southern Railways. The main structural members in these, vertical and horizontal, plus the braces, were made out of the center sills of 40-foot boxcars. There's a little more metal in them than a lot of railroad signals. This is at Winston, Virginia, south of Culpeper. Here it is in a side profile view, 3/4 view of the same signal. They were also used in addition to the southern main line between Washington and Atlanta on the southern Cincinnati-Chattanooga line, the former CNO and TP. Now, all of the ones on the former southern Washington and Atlanta had 2 and 3 light heads. Most of the ones on the CNO and TP were searchlights. This is a set of universal crossovers at a place called Blanchette, Kentucky, south of Cincinnati. There's no word on whether the actress has ever been seen in these parts. This is a location called McIver. It's near the former division point of Monroe, or Monroe is how you would attempt to pronounce it if you were not local. It's not even a wide spot in the railroad anymore, but just north of there is the end of double track. I'm standing on a highway bridge, and that's the reason that these heads have been moved down to the vertical part of the structure. There's the crews couldn't see them because this was a relatively new highway bridge. It got in the way. Now, it looks like the tree on the right is doing its best to achieve the same, but I suspect someone with a chainsaw will deal with that. Barbersville, Virginia, north of Charlottesville. This one I can call Big Orange at Orange. It's an NS southbound freight with BNSF run through power, and it is at Orange, Virginia, where the Cardinal splits off to go to the Buckingham branch. This is Colesville, Virginia, between Lynchburg and Charlottesville. There's a fairly significant northbound grade here. It's a nice overhead bridge to get this kind of shot. South of Manassas, you can see the new signals are in place, ready and waiting. This is at Calverton. Changes are about to take place at Burke. This is actually, that's Burke Lake Road in the background. I'm standing where the old Burke Lake Road street crossing was. This is the Crescent arriving in the Northern Virginia area. And down they came. Fortunately, there was some advance notice of this happening. It was interesting to watch, first torching off the old and then how they actually got them down. I've seen several different approaches to this. Lots of sparks. Then moving it off to the side, the remains. And in a lot of cases, the former signals actually sat line side for a considerable period of time until they were cleaned up. Here is the what was in the Northeast Regional from Lynchburg heading north. Now, of course, it would be coming from Roanoke. Finally, let me just, signals can be fun to make use of the light. This is on the former Santa Fe, east of Flagstaff. NS Intermodal Train 203 departing Manassas back when crews changed there and there was actually an office in use. The north end of the Susquehanna Bridge in Perryville with the line coming down the river from Enola and Harrisburg. That's the line branching off on the right. This place called Stewart's Draft in near Waynesboro, Virginia, on the Shenandoah line, looking north from the Manassas Airport on the former Southern. Once in a while, you get just great lighting, the sun under dark clouds. This is an interlocking called Moore, which is immediately north of the station in Manassas, to get passenger trains from between track 2 and track 1. Gorgeous light. Amtrak's Cardinal. This is looking the other way. The signal that has its back to us is the one you saw in the previous shot. This is looking the other direction, railroad west or south, as the train comes to a halt for its Manassas stop. I think the best description of this is Miller time at Miller City. It was a very mellow evening. Unfortunately, no train showed up in this great light, but worth taking the shot anyway. Ready for train orders at Griffith on the EJ&E. Same location, different angle. Lots of trackage here back in 1971 that's not there now. BNSF freight running on the former Southern Pacific, now Union Pacific. It's at, not Sandpoint, this Sand Cut on its way up to the Tehachapi Loop. This was during the siding extension north of Front Royal on the Shenandoah line, the NSH line. And for a while you had both new Darth Vader signals here and the color position lights. Since this is now part of double track, there are no signals at this location anymore. This was very temporary. Modern Darth Vader. This is on the B&O just east of Cumberland at a place called Mexico. That was the former Mexico interlocking tower now. And of course, all these signals have been converted from CPLs, but still a nice overhead view from the bridge. Arrowhead, this is on the grade south of Charlottesville on the former Southern. VRE coming south out of Clifton, Virginia, on its way to Manassas. The old Burke signals. All of these are gone now, of course. But some nice light and some fall foliage. Signals at Orange, Virginia, both, a more general view of it, and then close up with the nicely lit clouds also. Winston, Virginia. The railroad attempting to move the Swift containers swiftly. This is when Winston is about to change over here. The NS has put up cantilever signal bridges in a number of places, but in Winston, you'll see they're on either side of the track now rather than anything overhead. Here's the Lackawanna Heritage units during the transition period at Winston, the Lackawanna Heritage unit. Bealton, this one does have a cantilever bridge over it, just with one vertical. If you look at the track on the left, you can see a significant dip. Look, there are two vertical white posts on the ground. And the track goes through somewhat of a sag here. This is a place with a drainage problem. Preston Avenue signals just north of the passenger station in Charlottesville, Virginia. A beautiful, gorgeous sunset. Train 204 coming through shortly after that on its way north. A place called Gilbert. A lot of places where the former Southern went from double to single or vice versa had Y switches, equilateral turnouts. These are pretty much gone, although that one was still in place. This is Remington, Virginia, north of Culpeper. So look at the arrowhead signals from the other direction at a different time of year. Lots of chlorophyll visible in this picture. This was a case at a signal called Licking Run, which is still there now, but newer color lights. And the sturdy Sentinels, it took some work to take them out, but they did, and awaiting their fate. This is up on the coastal line of the former Maine Central going from Brunswick up towards Augusta. This line has been rail banked. There's talk of passenger and or commuter service, but the signal is going to require a good bit of resuscitation if they put it back to use. Here's one on the former Western Maryland up at Sibyllesville. Sadly, when the signals go out of use, the lenses become target practice for people with rifles in many cases. This is looking north from the Perryville Station platform. There's a northbound Acela here and a southbound regional. Take a look at that paddle signal on the left. Amazingly, several years ago, this has got to be about the newest color position light in the land. And this was to provide, I think, more flexibility in allowing the MARC trains to terminate there to go north if necessary. With a passing southbound Acela headed for the bridge. Well, that ends the program. Well, thank you. I appreciate it and be glad to answer some questions after Ann has had a chance to talk to you again.
Thank you very much, George. That was certainly a tour of lots of power, lots of signals, lots of fabulous pictures, and lots of territory on the eastern part of the United States, Africa, and Ireland. So we do have a couple of questions. The first question, first two questions come in just before the segment where you started just before all is gone. So it's in the Semaphore segment.
Okay.
And there was a shot that had a Union Pacific engine and on a single track with a semaphore on each side, one horizontal and one vertical.
Right.
And the questioner was wondering, what is going on there?
Well, the horizontal signal, I know the shot you're speaking of, it was at Belknap. We also saw some track equipment there. The signal that was facing us would have been the westbound signal. That should have been horizontal for stop. The oncoming train was approaching a vertical signal, which is proceed. Now, since I can't see it and I can't get to my computer to look at it, but one should be vertical and the other, because the signal in the train in the direction the train is moving towards us. That semaphore blade has not dropped to horizontal yet. Just like I can remember being on the former Burlington west of Aurora, coming back in a dome car at night. We only had about a 3 or 4 car train, and I think they were running at 90, and pretty much the whole train was under the signal bridge before it turned to red. And with a semaphore, that happens even more slowly. Okay.
Thank you. So in that same series, you showed a electromagnetic shoe on the ground that was nicely painted silver. And the question was, does that shoe stop the locomotive, or how does that work?
Well, there is a shoe actually on the locomotive that the device on the track pulls down if they run through the signal, and that immediately applies the brakes.
Okay, great.
Called Auto Train Stop, ATS.
Auto Train.
New York Central was a big user of that at one point.
Great, thank you for that description. We have another question that pretty much covers a lot of the talk that you said, which is the term searchlight. Do you know the etymology of the term searchlight? I mean, how did that name come about?
Well, I think some of us remember back, in our youth that, movie theaters, particularly drive-ins, would have giant searchlights on the back of a truck that they would bring in. And as things got dark, they would put them up in the sky, and then people would come see what it was. And then that might make them decide to watch the movie that night. It's simply a single light, whereas the majority of signals have multiple lights on them. So when you think of what we would call a searchlight, particularly, the ones on the former New York Central, for example, they're very small. It's not what I think of when you say searchlight, but it's the fact that it's only one light, and they have lenses that change the color.
When you're thinking about all the different kinds of signals and all the different kinds of lights in those signals, do you have a particular favorite that you fondly reminisce and say, I'd like to see one of those again?
Oh, we'd all like to see semaphores. I think there is one left on the MRL. Their big yard is near Billings, Montana. I can't remember what the name of the yard is right now, but there's a line that comes up from the south that comes from Casper, Wyoming, among other things, and ends in the yard. The approach signal to the yard was 10 or 15 years ago. We were on a family vacation and I saw it there. Subsequently, I've been able to find it on Google Earth, but I haven't looked in reasonable times. Now, this is right next to the railroad's de facto operating headquarters. And I think the proper term for it is, at some point, I think it was somebody's pet and could be fixed easily. So that one might be in place. But yeah, semaphores would be nice to see. I mean, even in the UK, they've taken down virtually all the semaphores except on tourist lines. For me, it was two that resonate with me are the former N&W CPLs, and they're going away over the next 18 months in this area. And the Southern Boxcar Bridges, because the Southern bridges were iconic. I don't know of another railroad that used that system. I mean, the signals themselves were perfectly ordinarily, 3-light traffic light type signals, but they were very distinctive signal bridges. So, those would be my preferences.
John Cowgill happened to, I think, comment in the chat that there is a semaphore still in use at Manassas Station.
It's not still in use. It's just sitting on top of the station.
It's sitting there.
Yeah, it's just sitting there, but it's not in use.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
No, we're on the same page with that one. Now, if somebody ever dropped that to the position where it looked, I don't know who's there to give a train order. Actually, I had a very interesting experience with signals once in Manassas.
Yeah, it's still an active station, but I don't think they have like an Amtrak employee there.
Well, the station is very nicely done. You can go in, on weekdays, maybe on Saturdays, the visitor center. You can access it. You get a parking pass for Amtrak there if you're taking a trip. But no, there are no railroad employees there. But I had a signal experience of a different sort in Manassas about 5-6 years ago. One of the heads on the northbound signals at Moore had that really dramatic light picture, actually 2 pictures. It was dark. I wondered if it was a burned out bulb. So by every grade crossing, you've seen these signs that if you see some problem, if the crossing gates aren't working right, call this number. I was waiting for something. I had quite a bit of time, so I got my cell phone, called the number, and it connects you with the Norfolk Southern Police. Well, unfortunately, the receptionist who did this, the message to her was you need to call the Washington District Dispatcher on the Piedmont Division and tell them that the signal at Moore, on track 2 looks like it has a burned out bulb. She kept thinking I was talking about the crossing gates. Well, finally, I did the best job I could of conveying this, and I left my cell phone number in case anybody had a problem. And I went off, and I was about 5 minutes away, and my cell phone rang. And all of a sudden, coming out of my cell phone was the same voice I've been listening to in my scanner all afternoon and evening. Hi, this is Mike at the NS. He said, can you still see that signal? I said, no, I can't, but I went back and looked. And he said, well, what is it? I said, the top head is dark. Now, from a safety perspective, a signal that's not lit is its most restrictive aspect. This is an absolute signal. They would stop, but this could cause inconvenience. And he said, wait a minute. He said, now what's it say? He said, oh, that's clear, because it went up to a high green. And he said, yes, I just did that. And he switched it off and he said, is it dark again? I said, thanks, I'm calling the maintainer.
Wonderful. Well, good eye on spotting signals.
He's a relatively young guy, but he was sort of an old school dispatcher. He was the kind that would talk to both crews approaching a meet and say, he'd be talking to 204, which was going to meet 203. I saw this one night at Calverton. And 203 was coming hard south, but 204 was going to get there sooner. And he told the 204 crew, he said, if you ease off, and he told them where they were and that the engineers can figure out how fast to go to do this, you won't have to stop. And sure enough, I watched the headlight meet nose to nose right in front of me. And then 204, by the time he got to the Calverton signal, did not have to stop or slow down at all. Now, there are a lot of new dispatchers, and everybody seems to want to do everything by the book. I mean, I'm not advocating unsafe practices, but I'm saying that, well, the railroad term is the old heads knew how to move trains within the realm of safety. But I think everyone is afraid to try some of these things now.
That's a fascinating story to end our program. I very much appreciate everything that you've said. We've got a lot of great comments saying, great job, learned a lot. And we just want to remind folks that we do this every month, the third Friday of every month. And then we record these and we put them up on the DCNRHS YouTube channel. So take a look at some of what we've got and subscribe. Thank you all for coming. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.